She slammed the laptop shut, then opened it again 5 seconds later. Her fingers trembled. She blinked hard, exhaled through her nose, and typed, "How to start over at 42." Not in quotes. Not with sarcasm. It wasn't a joke. It was a scream, one she couldn't let anyone hear. Tasha Carter had spent the last 15 years of her life doing everything right. Solid job in accounting. 2 kids. A husband with nice shirts and a growing beer belly. A townhome with a welcome mat. A reliable life. Predictable. Numb. The catalyst wasn't a single event. It was thousands. 1,000 mornings brushing her teeth in silence. 1,000 dinners with eyes on screens instead of each other. 1,000 nights wondering how she became a background character in her own story. Something broke last Tuesday, or maybe last year, but only now had she stopped long enough to listen to the echo inside her. What she expected to find in the search results was motivational fluff. Buy a journal. Declutter your home. Change your mindset. But somewhere between a listicle and a career quiz, her eyes caught a small blue link that read, "What if your second life starts when you finally stop pretending?" It wasn't from Forbes or Psychology Today. It was a blog. No ads. No likes. Just black text on a white screen. The writing was raw, messy, personal. It spoke of waking up in a motel after walking out on a corporate job. Of sleeping on couches. Of failing, of crying in grocery store aisles. But also, of painting again. Of selling the first canvas for $50. Of discovering breath where there was once only drowning. Tasha's chest tightened. She hadn't painted since college. She barely remembered what brushes felt like in her hand. Her degree in fine arts had turned to dust when her father said, "You'll never pay rent with that," and her boyfriend at the time added, "It's cute that you have a hobby." She scrolled to the bottom of the blog, where a note read, "If this finds you when you need it, paint something. Anything. Send it here." There was an email address. She shut the laptop again. Harder this time. Her heart raced like she'd just said something scandalous out loud. But no one had heard. Except her. That night, she rummaged through boxes in the basement. Past baby clothes, old bills, and a blender she never used. She found a box labeled Tasha's Stuff, College. Inside, a bent sketchpad. Hardened tubes of acrylic paint. Brushes stiff from years of silence. She sat on the cold floor, surrounded by the smell of dust and memory, and didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, she opened the sketchpad. The first page was blank. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just got up, walked to the kitchen table, and laid the pad down. Then she turned on the light. She dipped the stiffest brush into warm water and watched old paint melt off in cloudy swirls, like memories leaking into the present. Her hands moved carefully, almost reverently, as if waking a long silent part of herself. The acrylic tubes were half-dried, but one, burnt sienna, squeezed out a usable glob. That was enough. She didn't know what she was painting. Her hand moved before her mind caught up. Jagged lines, muted tones. Something messy. Something wrong. But it was hers. When she looked at the sketchpad after half an hour, she saw nothing impressive, just pain. That was the color. Not sienna. Pain. The next night, she painted again. And again the night after that. Always after the kids were asleep. Always in silence, except for the ticking kitchen clock and the hum of the fridge. Her husband didn't ask questions. He assumed it was just another phase, like when she did yoga for 3 weeks in 2016 or tried journaling in the bathroom for self-care. He didn't look. 1 week in, she photographed the 4th piece and opened the email from the blog. Her finger hovered above the send button for over a minute. What was she hoping for? Validation? A sign? Or just someone, anyone, to say, "I see you"? She hit send. 2 days later, the reply came, "Thank you for sharing something real. Would you let me show it in our next small exhibit?" Tasha stared at the screen. An exhibit? Her? It sounded insane. But the message was signed with a name, Elise Monroe. She recognized it from the blog. Elise was the woman who'd walked away from corporate life, the one who'd painted through fear. And now she was asking her to be part of something. Her fingers trembled as she typed back, "Yes." The exhibit was in a small gallery in Asheville, 6 hours away. Tasha told her husband she was visiting an old college friend. He barely nodded, distracted by his phone. She drove in silence. No music. Just the sound of tires and thought. She felt everything: excitement, fear, shame, hunger, for something more. The gallery was modest, with white walls and warm light. She recognized Elise instantly. She was older than Tasha imagined, with a freckled face and wild, graying curls. She greeted Tasha not like a stranger, but like someone who'd been expecting her. "This one's yours?" Elise pointed at the piece. Tasha nodded, suddenly shy. "It's nothing, really." Elise tilted her head. "It's not nothing. It's the moment you stopped hiding." People walked by. Some paused. One woman even teared up, touching her chest softly before moving on. Tasha stood frozen. She didn't feel like an artist. She felt like a fraud in a borrowed body. But that night, Elise asked her to come back the next month. "Bring more," she said. "Bring what you're afraid to show." She didn't tell anyone she was painting again. Not her kids. Not her husband. Not even her best friend from college, who once dreamed of Broadway but now sold insurance. It felt too raw. Too personal. Like breathing through cracked ribs. Each evening, when the dishes were done and the lights dimmed, Tasha opened her sketchpad. The art wasn't beautiful. Sometimes, it wasn't even good. But it was honest. She painted her mother's silence, her marriage's slow erosion, the ache of living invisibly. The canvas didn't flinch. It took everything she had to give. She began selling pieces. Small ones, through Elise's online shop. At first, it was enough for gas money. Then groceries. One day, she realized she had more money in her PayPal account than in her checking. And still, she told no one. One Saturday morning, while folding laundry, her husband asked, "Where were you last weekend?" She froze. Elise. From college, she lied again. She had an art show. He shrugged. "You missed soccer practice." "I know." He didn't push further. He rarely did anymore. That night, she painted with more fury than usual. Strokes tore across the canvas. The colors bled like bruises. She didn't even realize she was crying until tears dropped onto the paint, mixing with blue. Weeks passed. Then one morning, Elise called. "We're curating a new project," she said. "A gallery in Brooklyn. It's big, Tasha. They want raw stories. Women who changed their lives. Your work, your voice, it needs to be there." Tasha laughed nervously. "I'm not ready." "No one is," Elise replied. "Come anyway." Brooklyn. Just the word made her hands sweat. She'd never shown her work in a major city. She'd never shown herself, really. But something inside her whispered, "You've already started, why stop now?" She said yes. And for the first time, she didn't lie about it. When she told her husband, he blinked. "You're flying to New York?" "For what?" "A gallery. My paintings are part of it." He scoffed. You're serious? She met his eyes. Completely. He didn't argue. He just went back to his phone. At the airport, she carried her art carefully, packed between sweaters. Her stomach churned the whole flight. What if no one liked it? What if she was just pretending? Brooklyn was loud, alive, unapologetic. The gallery buzzed with people, buyers, critics, strangers with bright eyes. Her pieces hung among others, but they didn't disappear. They breathed. Someone asked for a photo with her. Another offered to buy the largest one. By the end of the night, 2 paintings were sold. But what shook her most wasn't the money, it was a message slipped into her hand by a quiet woman in a red coat. It read, "Your work reminded me who I used to be. Thank you." Tasha held the note all the way back to the hotel. She read the note again in the hotel room, her hands trembling more from disbelief than cold. "Your work reminded me who I used to be. Thank you." It was a sentence. Just one. But it rang louder than applause, louder than sales, louder than the clinking glasses at the gallery. She couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling and let the silence speak. Somewhere in that darkness, a realization settled like dust: someone had seen her. Not the version she curated, not the polite wife or tired mother. Her. The next morning, she skipped the airport cab and walked through Brooklyn streets still wet from overnight rain. Her shoes soaked, hair wild, but she didn't care. For the first time in years, her mind was awake. Not rushing. Not anxious. Just alive. She flew home exhausted but full. And then came the silence. The house was the same. Dishes in the sink. Laundry on the couch. Her husband grunted a "welcome back." The kids didn't ask where she'd been. Life had continued. She was a stranger in her own routine. She wanted to share everything: the exhibit, the note, the faces of people who saw her work and felt something, but when she opened her mouth, nothing came out. The words got stuck behind fear. Behind old habits. Instead, she painted. She painted as if her soul needed it to breathe. Her canvases filled the garage. Then the basement. Elise called weekly, then daily. There were more orders, more galleries, even an offer from a magazine. But with every step forward, a shadow followed her home. "You're spending too much time on this," her husband said one night, his voice sharp. "It's important to me," she replied carefully. He looked at her like she'd spoken in another language. "It's not a job, Tasha. It's a hobby. Don't forget that." That night, she couldn't paint. Her hand froze above the canvas. The brush hovered, waiting, but the fire inside dimmed. Doubt crept in. Was she selfish? Was she chasing something that would never last? But then she remembered the note. That stranger. That moment. And she painted again. Only this time, she painted not for galleries, not for money, not even for Elise. She painted the truth of her life. She painted the silence at dinner. She painted the ache of disappearing. And when Elise saw the new series, she didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she said, "This isn't just art. It's a message. Have you ever thought about doing a solo show?" Tasha's stomach twisted. A solo show? That meant being seen. Fully. What would I even call it? She whispered. Elise smiled. Becoming. She wrote the word "becoming" on a sticky note and pressed it to the fridge. No one noticed it for 3 days. Not her husband. Not the kids. Not even the cat. But to her, it was a banner. A warning. A prayer. Elise moved quickly. She found a small studio space in downtown Richmond, intimate but elegant. Tasha hesitated. Renting a gallery, framing work, travel, shipping, it all cost money. Real money. She did the math 5 times before she told Elise, "I'll find a way." So she took a risk. She pulled from the family savings account, just a little at first. Enough to order frames and canvas boards. But money was tighter than she thought. Inflation, groceries, tuition bills. Her husband noticed. "You used the savings," he said flatly. "For the show," she said. "You should have asked." "It's mine too." "That's not the point." But it was the point. And it wasn't. Everything was bleeding together now: art, home, identity. What was hers anymore? She painted late into the nights, heart pounding with each stroke. The pieces were brutal. One canvas showed a woman curled in a hallway, her outline fading into wallpaper. Another, just hands, reaching through a foggy window. Raw. Undeniable. And every time she finished one, she asked herself, will this be the piece that ruins me? Or the one that saves me? The weeks leading up to the exhibit were chaos. She worked full-time at the accounting firm by day, painted by night, and coordinated logistics during stolen lunch breaks. She drank too much coffee. Forgot dinner more than once. But she was burning for something again. The night before the show, she stood in the empty gallery as Elise placed the last placard on the wall. Tasha's name was printed in bold beneath the title, Becoming. Her breath caught. "I'm not ready," she whispered. "No one ever is," Elise replied. But that never stopped the truth from needing to be told. The day of the show, it rained. Hard. Thunder clapped like doubt. Tasha stood in the gallery's back room in a borrowed dress, fingers twitching. She didn't want praise. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted to be seen. The first hour was slow. A few couples wandered in, quiet. Then a group of college students. Then a woman with silver braids and thick glasses walked straight to the center canvas, the hands in the window, and stood silently for nearly 5 minutes. She wiped her eye. Then turned. "Who painted this?" Tasha stepped forward, unsure. The woman walked over, eyes red. "Thank you," she said simply. "You said what I couldn't." Tasha nodded. No words formed. By the end of the night, 5 paintings had sold. But when she returned home, her husband was waiting at the kitchen table, arms crossed. "We need to talk," he said. She set her bag down quietly, heart still echoing the voices and faces from the gallery. The kitchen was dim except for one overhead light. Her husband sat at the table, elbows on the wood, jaw tight. A glass of water. Unspoken things floating in the silence. Tasha didn't speak first. "I saw your bank statement," he began. "You spent more than you said." She nodded. "I did." "On what?" "Shipping. Prints. Renting the space. I didn't expect the framing to cost so much." He shook his head, not in anger, but something colder, disappointment. "This is spiraling. You're not thinking clearly." Her fingers curled into her palms. "You mean, I'm not thinking like you?" "No, I mean like someone who understands this is a phase, not a plan." Tasha sat. Her voice didn't shake. 5 pieces sold. 2 commissions came in already. "I've made nearly half back." "But how long will it last?" he pressed. "You have a good job. Stability. A family. What happens when this art thing runs dry?" She stared at him. And for the first time in years, she saw him not as the man she married, but as a mirror reflecting the life she'd been living, safe, muted, expected. "What happens," she asked slowly, "if I never try?" The silence that followed was louder than any shouting match. That night, they slept in separate rooms. The air between them heavy with truths unsaid. Her daughter knocked on her door the next morning and asked, "Are you okay?" Tasha smiled gently. "Yeah. Just tired." She wasn't lying. She was tired. But not from painting or galleries or work. She was tired from being small. Days passed. Orders kept coming. Elise offered to help her set up a personal shop. A blogger reached out for an interview. Her inbox filled with strangers writing things like, "Your art made me feel less alone," and "I haven't picked up a brush in 20 years, but tonight I did." Still, home grew colder. Her husband withdrew. He came home late, spoke less, smiled rarely. The kids noticed. They asked fewer questions. The tension settled into the walls, like a fog that wouldn't lift. And yet, Tasha kept painting. Because now, when she painted, she wasn't escaping. She was recording. Documenting her becoming. Not always beautifully, not cleanly, but honestly. One evening, she received an invitation. A residency program in Vermont had seen her work through the magazine. They offered her a full month to paint, reflect, and create. Paid. Private cabin. Time. It was a gift and a test. She told her husband over dinner. He looked up from his plate. "You're going to leave for a month?" "I want to say yes." "You want to abandon your family for art?" "No," she said softly. "I want to stop abandoning myself." He didn't respond. 3 days later, she accepted the residency. And 1 week after that, she left. Not forever. But maybe for the first time. The cabin was smaller than she'd imagined. Just one room, wooden walls, a twin bed, and a window that looked out onto a trembling lake. No TV. No Wi-Fi. No clock. Just paint, brushes, and space to become. Tasha stood at the center of the room, her suitcase still zipped. The quiet pressed against her chest like a strange, new gravity. She hadn't been alone like this in over 20 years. The first night was hard. She kept reaching for her phone. Kept expecting someone to call. Her husband didn't. Her daughter sent a text, "Miss you already." That was all. Her son didn't write at all. She made tea and sat by the window. The moon rippled on the lake's surface. She thought about the word selfish. She'd been called that once. Or maybe more than once. But what if selfishness, when used to breathe, was survival? By day 3, she began painting again. But something had changed. The colors were no longer just grief. They carried tension, yes, but also strength. Resistance. Her brush moved differently, like it had grown bolder in the absence of noise. She painted with her whole arm, her whole body. She didn't edit or explain. She didn't flinch. She started each morning with a walk in the woods, breathing air that smelled of moss and pine, then returned to the cabin and let the day shape her. By the end of the first week, she had completed 7 canvases. One was pure red. Just red. And yet, when she looked at it, she felt more seen than by 1,000 conversations. Letters came from Elise, from gallery owners, even from a woman in Sweden who had found Tasha's blog and asked if she could translate her posts for a local collective. Tasha wrote back, "Yes, of course. Thank you for asking." But then came the message she wasn't ready for. It was from her husband. "We need to talk when you get back. This distance isn't just about miles anymore." She stared at the screen for a long time. There was no anger in the words. No cruelty. Just a quiet finality. Like someone slowly placing a glass down after drinking the last sip. She painted furiously that night. As if the lake itself would disappear if she stopped. The piece was chaotic, dark corners, trembling lines, but in the center, a single burst of gold. The next day, the program's director asked if she'd be willing to speak at the closing showcase. Nothing formal, just a few words about her journey. She said yes before her fear could answer for her. On the final night, in front of 20 strangers and the smell of wet pine, she stood before her painting with shaking hands. "I came here because I thought I was breaking," she began. "But it turns out, I was unfolding." The audience didn't clap immediately. They sat still, caught in the quiet between Tasha's words and their own unspoken thoughts. Then a ripple, soft, sincere applause, followed by a few tears, a few deep exhales. She stepped away from the microphone, heart thundering, eyes wet but unashamed. She had told the truth. Not the polished kind. The trembling, imperfect kind. The kind that stings when it lands but heals after. Back in the cabin, she couldn't sleep. Her final painting still stood on the easel, a burst of defiance in a sea of shadow. She stared at it for hours, knowing that when she packed it tomorrow, it wouldn't just be a canvas. It would be a chapter. She returned home the next evening. The house was quiet. Her husband waited at the kitchen table again. This time, no glass of water. No preamble. "I think we're done," he said. She nodded. "I know." There were no raised voices. No accusations. Only sadness. And clarity. She didn't beg. She didn't bargain. She had already said everything she needed to, on canvas, in Vermont, to strangers who somehow understood more than the people in her own home ever had. The separation was civil. The kids took it hard. Her daughter cried. Her son didn't speak to her for days. But slowly, honesty built bridges that comfort never could. Tasha answered every question with softness, with truth. "I didn't leave you," she told them. "I found me." She moved into a small apartment above a florist shop, the windows always filled with light. Her studio was the second bedroom. She painted daily. Sometimes for money. Sometimes for no reason at all. One of her paintings was featured in a national exhibit called Women Who Stayed. Another in Women Who Left. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had done both. Her blog grew. Thousands followed her journey. Not for advice, but for witness. To feel less alone in their own unfolding. Elise invited her to co-host a retreat for women in transition, divorcees, caretakers, dreamers in hiding. Tasha hesitated. "What could I possibly say to them?" she asked. Elise smiled. "You don't have to say anything. You already showed them." At the retreat, a woman stood up during the circle, voice breaking. "I read your blog at 3 a.m., holding divorce papers I couldn't sign. Your words made me believe there's life on the other side." Tasha didn't reply with wisdom. She simply held the woman's hand. That was enough. Still, not everything was perfect. There were days she questioned herself. Days she missed the smell of her old home. The comfort of routine. The sound of her kids' laughter echoing through hallways she no longer walked. But those moments passed. And in their place, something new began to grow. 1 year later, she stood in her studio, barefoot on a floor smudged with paint and memory. Outside, spring unfolded, trees unafraid to bloom. She was preparing for her first international show. Madrid. Her name on posters. Her work shipped in crates. Unimaginable once. She held a canvas in her hands. It wasn't new. In fact, it was one of her earliest. She'd kept it hidden, too personal to show, 3 blurred figures in a dim hallway, one slowly stepping into the light. For months, she hadn't been able to finish it. Now, she knew how. She added one final stroke, a sliver of gold in the figure's hand, something they carried forward. Not perfection. Not resolution. Just possibility. When she stood back, her throat caught. It was her. And it wasn't. It was every woman who'd stood at the edge of herself and dared to take one step further. Her phone buzzed. A message from her daughter. "Mom, I showed your painting to my art teacher. She said it made her cry. Can we FaceTime tonight?" Tasha smiled, fingers trembling in that familiar way. Not from fear, but from awe. Her son had come around slowly. After a year of watching, listening, visiting her new apartment, he'd finally said, "I didn't get it before. But now I think I do." That was all. And it was enough. Her ex-husband never apologized. But he didn't have to. Their chapter had ended, and she had found peace in turning the page without vengeance. Elise was now her closest friend, business partner, fellow survivor, and soul mirror. Together, they built something more than art. A movement. A safe space for women who had been told their worth expired after 40. Who believed silence was strength. Who had traded themselves for belonging. Tasha knew her journey wasn't unique. And that made it sacred. Because if her story could echo in someone else's darkness, it meant none of it was wasted, not the quiet years, the aching dinners, the trembling first canvas, the loss, the fear, the leaving. At the Madrid exhibit, someone asked her in a soft Spanish accent, "When did you know this was your path?" She paused. "I didn't," she replied. "I just stopped saying no to the voice that never left me." Later, walking alone through the narrow streets lit by old lamps and warm shadows, she whispered into the air, as if someone somewhere might still be listening. "I didn't start over. I started true." And in the hush that followed, something inside her, finally, completely, exhaled.